The story begins. Gray sky. Heroes with carts calmly move along their path. Goblins came out of nowhere and ran at them, shouting. The heroes took out their weapons and prepared to defend themselves. In an instant, they were face to face with the goblins. A bearded man with a cigarette in his hand says that such attacks occur every day. Suddenly, someone appears behind him. The goblins growled angrily. Before the man could turn around, a long-haired guy rushed by his side. The goblin immediately started attacking. Before he could hit, he was immediately cut in half by the new hero. The hero fought off the next goblin with his shield. A third man ran at him. The hero let go of the shield and grabbed the goblin's head with one hand, ripping off its left arm and half of its torso. The goblin screams in pain. The bearded man, who had been standing at the back all this time and had seen everything, was surprised by the long-haired guy's abilities. Our hero asks about himself. Who is he that tore up a goblin with his bare hands? We are transferred to the main character's computer. He tells us that he liked games from childhood. He says that it is not a sin, at least not such a big sin to be in this country with a caste system and poverty, treachery and murder, and last but not least, countless monsters. His name in the game is Dalen, but his real name is. We're being taken back to the game. Dalen rides in a cart and writes something down in a notebook. A bald man approaches him with a bottle in his hands and says that it's time to change shifts. Dalen closes his notebook and notices that it's getting cold. He gets up and asks his partner if anything special has happened. The man replied that it was quiet and not a single goblin appeared. Dalen asked if it was because he was currently patrolling the maze city. He also says that it's getting colder outside anyway. Winter is coming, so it's only natural. But since he's from a southern village, it's hard for him to get used to it. The cart hit a rock. The bald man choked and spat out whatever he was drinking at that moment. Dalen said that he saw Palan and wished his friend a good rest, pointing to the place where the towels were lying. Baldy cleared his throat and said it was a good job. Dalen stepped out of the cart. Someone wished him a good morning. The main character tells us that 2 years have passed since the training. The starting point of this game is known as the Bastion of Humanity, the Labyrinth City of Palan. Dalen thinks that this is a completely different level from when he saw it on the screen. We are told that this is a huge city where hundreds of thousands of people live. It is said that this is also the only way to safely descend into the underground maze. There is no other way that would allow them to avoid the monsters coming out of the maze and collect the countless treasures hidden underneath. We are told that also based on the setting, there is a wish stone at the very bottom of the maze that will give us one thing. The main character argues that this is probably the only way to return to Earth. He thinks that to check if he really exists, he needs to go down into the maze. A bearded man appears behind Dalen and greets him. Dalen greets him, calling him the owner of the Gallios shopping center. He tells him not to call him that formally. We learn that the bearded man's name is Bulkma Gallios, and he is the owner of the Gallios shopping center. Bulkma says that they are comrades who have faced danger together, so Dalen may not address him as formally. Dalen asks, Bulkma? Bulkma laughs and says that the Northerners, of course, are tough. Dalen asks if Bulkma has anything to tell him. Bulkma replied that Dalen was witty and liked that very much about him. Bulkma said that he had an offer for Dalen and suggested that he join the mall as a personal mercenary. The main character is surprised to say that he has never seen such an event in this game before. Dalen asks again, a personal mercenary? Bulkma says that his trading instincts tell him that even though there are countless superhumans who fly and crawl in this maze city, he can rest assured that Dalen will soon stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Dalen asks if Bulkma is trying to keep him busy before that happens. Bulkma says it will be good for Dalen. Dalen asks what Bulkma is talking about. After a moment's thought, Dalen thanked Bulkma and declined the offer. Bulkma said he knew Dalen would say that. Bulkma handed the bag to Dalen, saying that it was his commission 15 shillings. Dalen was surprised to say that if his commission hadn't been 10 shillings, He'd thought he'd get less if he joined halfway. Bulkma told him to think of the rest as a sort of investment gathering. Bulkma said he wanted to strengthen his relationship with a potential warrior. Dahlin smiled in agreement. Bulkma handed it back and told Dalen not to ignore it in the future. Dolan was pleased to say that it sounded great. Bulkma held out his hand to Dahlin and said that they would see each other later, calling him Northern Soldier Dolan. Dahlin held out his hand in return. They shook hands. Evening. Sunset. Life in the city goes on as usual. Dahlin walks down the street. He ponders Bulkma's suggestion. The main character says that he has never seen such an event before. The main character thought about whether this means that certain events can change depending on his actions. He reflects that it was a tempting offer, but what he would need to do once he arrived here was preordained. Dahlin walks down the street. He turns a corner into a dark alley. He noticed a bar somewhere. The main character thinks that he seems to have come to the right place. Dahlin walks into the bar. There are a lot of people sitting there, shouting and swearing all around him. At one of the tables, a guy tells another about tying some to a coke. After another, someone is shouting that this world can go to hell. Someone is asleep at table 3. The main character reflects that this is definitely a place where there is something that he needs. He says that sometime after the game starts, he is. Dahlin stops abruptly, turns back, notices someone. Dahlin smiles broadly. The main character says that he finally found what he was looking for. A notification is received. It says that he found the corpse of a pathetic soldier. Another one that says that if he collects this corpse, he will be able to inherit its abilities, as well as some skills and items. The main character thinks which weapon will be the best. We received a notification asking if the hero wants to pick up the corpse. The hero asks if he can handle this difficult game. Dahlin holds out his hand. A collection of corpses. Dahlin takes the body with a wicked grin. The main character says that he will watch this game to the end, no matter what. The main character says that he always liked challenging games. His management skills were good, so he got bored with light games. However, the game he was looking for was not easy even for him. The character was very weak, and the monsters were too strong. The world within the game was gradually collapsing, and the NPCs that were his allies were busy dealing with demons or plotting to betray him. The hero died 100 times, but started playing again. It often happened that he stayed up all night, hoping to get to the end. How many hundreds of times has he already died? The main character thinks. A notification pops up about the possibility of purchasing certain products, and you are asked to choose the answer yes or no. The hero angrily exclaims that he is very tired of all this. After all, what kind of game is this that you can't get to the end of? If he didn't feel sorry for the time he spent on it, he would have deleted it long ago. The notification about the possibility of purchasing goods appears again, and the hero clicks on the answer option, yes. We're transported back to the game, back to the bar. The main character again thinks that it would be better to delete the game. Dahlin, sitting at the bar, notices the ghostly legs of a corpse next to him. Others do not see the corpse, and the main character is completely satisfied. The hero says that the DLC successor is an option that allows a new character to adopt the abilities of heroes who died in the last game. This is like endless growth for those players who have already died several hundred times. There is, however, one drawback: the need to personally pick up corpses in the place where players died. Here is a notification about the discovery of the stinking corpse of a mercenary. The hero decides to take the corpse. Dahlin's hands are filled with some powerful energy. A notification appears about increasing muscle mass by +1 and skill by exactly the same amount. Dahlin is surprised. Another alert: a combat technique in Dehaman's armor has been detected. It should be explained that this technique was developed by Dehaman, the commander of the Imperial Knight Order, who could no longer see that his knights were not capable of anything if they lost their weapons. Armor serves as both a defense and a weapon. Dahlin learns this skill from the corpse. The main character is surprised that this character had such a skill. That's not bad at all, Dahlin says with an unpleasant grin. The main character decides that he has finished his business in the bar, and it's time for him to leave there. He starts to leave, but suddenly someone calls out to him. Two unpleasant types are suitable, one with long hair, the other with a bald head. The first one says that I haven't seen Dolan here before. After all, he seems to be a mercenary, and he seems to have nothing to do in such an abandoned inn. Then the long-haired man asks if Dolan has forgotten his manners. When asked to clarify what they are talking about, the says that he means taxes. He, Marlon, supposedly owns an inn, and anyone who enters must pay him separately for a safe stay and guaranteed satiation. Dolan sighed heavily, thinking that he would have to part with the money, especially since Marloon had confirmed that it was perfectly natural here. Then Dolan noticed the blackmailer's knife. It seemed to him that this was the weapon that Marlon had used to kill him in the past. Dolan says he doesn't have the money to pay the strange tax. The extortionist viciously asks again and gets confirmation. The bold partner wants to use brute physical force, but Marloon stops him, stating that they probably shouldn't have bothered the beggar. Then he asks Dolan if he paid for the wine he ordered, and gets an affirmative answer. Marlon tells Dalen to move on, and they let him go. Dolan calmly says goodbye. A wicked grin appears on Marloon's face. He reaches for his knife and lunges at Dolan. Dolan turns abruptly and says he saw this coming. On the street in front of the bar, meanwhile, everything is calm. However, the door of the establishment flies out here along with Marlon, who knocked it out with his body. The villain is lying on the ground, sprawled out from a powerful blow. When he comes to, he sits up. Dolan, going out on the street, says that he will not fall for the trick of this freak a second time. Marloon understands that the situation is as shitty as possible. He calls on the help of nearby henchmen, whom he calls cretins. They take up arms, surround Dolan, but they are frankly afraid of his appearance. They doubt that it is a human being. Dolan seems like a giant to them, some barbarian from the north. The latter, meanwhile, feels something unusual, namely the appearance of a new skill. This, of course, cannot but rejoice. Dolan's hands start to emit rays of light. He beckons his opponents with his hand, inviting them to join the fight. The call is heard, and an armed mob pounces on Dolan. The villains try to hit him with cold weapons. Dolan activates the Dehaman armor combat technique skill. His eyes shine with a strange light. My fists are full of energy. Dolan lashes out at the attackers. Those under his blows fly in different directions. In place of the departed enemies, new ones come, but the same fate awaits them. Again and again. The villains are incapable of harming Dolan, and their weapons shatter as if they hit an iron pillar. And Dalen's glowing fists hit the target every time. This is a very tough fight. Dolan goes wild. Marloon yells angrily at everyone, asking if they have eaten anything at all this morning and why they are standing still. He orders Dolan killed. Bandits rush to the attack with renewed vigor. The main character, meanwhile, notices an increase of just 1% and curses the unprecedented level of difficulty. The battle seems to have ended in Dolan's victory, and he is hailed from behind by a new interlocutor. He accuses the winner of using physical violence in front of everyone, which is completely unacceptable for a mercenary. The threat seems strange, especially coming from a man who has appeared now that it's all over. Dolan picks up the axe. His opponent threatens to report everything to the guards, but sees an axe blade flying directly into his face. Dolan falsely apologizes for the weapon slipping out of his hands, which split the bald skull in half. No one will tell anyone anything anymore. It's getting dark, and the stars are starting to appear in the sky. We're in front of a house with bright windows. Dolan tosses the coin purse he got from the fight. The innkeeper who threatened him paid the price for his audacity and became much poorer. The money earned will allow Dolan to stay in a better place. For example, in a hotel with a sign in the form of two crossed swords. It's called Sword and Shield, and the concierge welcomes him here. He asks how many days a potential guest plans to stay, and informs that the hotel provides discounts depending on the level of the mercenary. Dolan tells him that he has a silver rank, and that 1 week is enough to start with. In response, he learns that members of his class are entitled to free breakfasts and lunches, but dinner will have to be paid separately, and all this will cost 7 shillings. Dallin weighs the purse in his hand and realizes it's a little expensive. However, it counts down the requested number of coins. They put him in room 412. The guest goes inside and discards his armor and weapons. This is just the beginning. In this game, the most important thing is not to attack, but to survive. In order to prevent the end of the world, you need to become stronger, and this requires money and points. With the current weapons and indicators, nothing can be achieved. You need money for good equipment, as well as improving your abilities to use this successor skill. Thanks to hundreds of attempts in the game, the characters' corpses are scattered all over the mainland. We need to gather everyone to become much stronger than before. But the time is too short. We need to prepare as quickly as possible. There is a special task that will allow you to earn money and get corpses at the same time. To do this, you need to meet tomorrow with the owner of the nest. In front of the entrance to the nest, we swing a figure of a raven. Inside on the table, we see 2 stacks of books, a bottle and a bowl. A girl is sitting at the table, thinking about Dallin. She holds a card in her hand, which apparently says that this is a mercenary from the north. Morning. In front of his hotel is Dallin, past which ordinary residents of the town go about their business. The mercenary thinks about going back to where he was before. Having made this decision, he goes to the intended goal along a narrow, littered street. Dallin walks over to the nest and looks at the raven figurine. He seems to have come where he wanted, even if it's some decrepit backyard. Dallin walks in, calling out to anyone who might be there. You can't see anyone inside, even though the place seems to be operating. The door is open, but the owner is not there. This is very strange. Was he an uninvited guest here? The girl we saw earlier, meanwhile, crouched behind the door with a crossbow in her hands. Dallin decides that he needs to explain everything and knocks on the door that he sees in front of him. It is behind it that the owner of the institution can hide. The girl finally decides to go out to meet the visitor. But you need to do it cleverly. She pretends that she took him for someone else and says that with non-urgent matters you need to come in after hours. This, of course, confuses Dallin, who sees her for the first time in his life. He reasonably notes that the more visitors, the more profit, and is happy for the girl, who is doing well. The cutie agrees that she is very capable and notes that her interlocutor speaks too well for a guest from the north. She'd heard of a barbarian before, if Dallin knew what she was talking about. The latter, of course, understands, but notes that an immigrant in the 2nd generation should speak well. This would be very logical. It turns out that the girl does not know the meaning of the word immigrant. Dallin explains that he has become civilized, and reproaches the interlocutor for the fact that for an information merchant, she does not know foreign words well. The latter fact frankly disappoints him. The girl bursts out laughing. She says she didn't think she'd be so politely let down. After excusing herself, she invites the guest to come in and have a cup of tea. All this time, she kept her crossbow on her back. Dallin grins because the girl almost put a hole in his heart. The girl must really be up to something. She hands the guest a cup of tea and starts talking about herself, even though Dallin might have heard of her before. Her name is Sienna. She's an information dealer and runs the Crow's Nest. She's the best informant in Chengdong. Dallin, in turn, tells her his name. He knows that in the nest, you can get different tasks. Sienna confirms this possibility, but asks to know who told him about this place. It turns out that this is someone, Buck Van, who also said that if the establishment offers wine, then you can drink it. But with tea, it is better not to do this. Sienna calls Brian a talker and wonders if Dallin accidentally saved his life. Nothing else can explain such revelations. Dallin basically confirms her hunch. According to the girl, the cipher that he knocked on the door, she tells only real friends. Surprised that he was known to a stranger, she decided to probe Dallin. He notices that the fee seems too expensive to him. but he is used to risking his life for work. Sienna suggests we discuss the assignment. She doesn't know Dallin, isn't convinced that he didn't force the necessary information out of his pocket by force or threats. Therefore, she can only entrust him with small tasks that will not affect her business, even if they are failed. Dallin agrees, because he really sees the customer for the first time. Sienna thinks for a moment. After that, he offers the great warrior to deal with the goblins with his bare hands. Dallin is back in the city lane. He has a task card in his hand. The mercenary stares into it, thinking that Sienna is a sly fox who has screwed up his brain. After all, she must have known about him from the moment he arrived in Falchion. Anyway, Dallin goes to the place indicated on the card. The end point is a grated tunnel in the city wall, where the city drains out. This is a small street in the vicinity of Qingdong. The task is called The Case of Missing People on Malaya Street. The disappearances have been going on for a month. They occur every 3 to 5 days. Most of the victims are unaccompanied girls or children, and recently a young guy disappeared. The criminal gradually gives himself free rein. An approximate place of disappearance is the very tunnel through which city drains flow. Suddenly, Dallin hears the sound of slapping feet. A frightening shadow appears on the tunnel wall, resembling the outline of a dragon. Anji, hungry, comes from around the corner. A humanoid creature appears in front of Dallin, moving on all fours. The mercenary grabs his sword and covers himself with his shield. Suddenly, he realizes that this is where he was devoured earlier. A monster with glowing eyes, grinning, crawls up to Dallin. A notification appears about the discovery of the hunter's corpse, which was eaten by the test subject. Then a hint that you can learn the skills of a corpse by killing the person who consumed it. In the sewer tunnel, on the cards in front of Dallin, sits a fearsome creature with a thickly veined back. An evil grin appears on the hunter's face. He is glad that he found his target so quickly. Luck, it seems, is clearly on his side. A notification appears about the discovery of the hunter's corpse, which was eaten by the test subject. The monster is very hungry. You can see it in its glowing eyes. A hint pops up that you can learn the skills of a corpse by killing the person who consumed it. The small street monster is one of the boss monsters of the small street. Originally, it was an ogre-sized monster that easily tore down buildings. The monster, meanwhile, sees a lot of food in front of it, and is also happy, since it does not eat enough of small prey. Dallin understands that this individual is not fully formed. It's just the beginning of the game, and it's probably still growing. But this is even better, since the sprout can be cut off in advance, preventing it from developing into something more serious. The battle begins. The monster roars and lunges at the enemy. Dallin takes a defensive stance. The monster delivers a powerful blow, but misses. The mercenary hits back. His fist slams into the monster's belly. The tunnel is literally shaking. The monster flies off, smashes its head into the wall, and begins to wheeze. A grimace of pain crosses his face. Blood oozes from the wound. Dallin notices that the creature is beginning to be reborn. He watches in disbelief as it regains its strength. The second round begins, and again with a failed sewer monster attack. Dallin hits back with his sword and hits the opponent in the side. Blood spurts out in all directions, but it seems to the mercenary that he hit poorly, too weakly. But the enemy, bleeding profusely, falls to his knees. Dallin raises his sword above his head to finish him off. The monster starts begging for mercy. It claims to be human. The mercenary looks at the enemy with bewilderment and asks if he has come to his senses. The creature confirms that it is conscious. It says that it did not become so of its own free will. No one wants to devour people of their own free will. The monster was sewn into it by some freaks. Dallin asks in disbelief. The monster replies that he doesn't know who it was. But the villains were wearing black cloaks and masks. They used a strange liquid and spells. Dallin asks what the masks looked like. It turns out that a huge mouth was drawn on their smooth surface. In addition, the masks were gold. Dallin knows that over time, these freaks will cause him problems. We need to prepare to meet them in advance. The monster, meanwhile, realizes what it has done in its unconscious form. It has, for a moment, devoured people. Dallin calms the defeated enemy because everything did not happen according to the will of the monster. The monster grins its teeth, promising to destroy its tormentors. Crouching down, he thanks Dallin for sparing him. The mercenary sheaths his sword. The monster doesn't stop remembering what happened to it. He was fed the flesh of his own daughter. They forcibly opened their mouths and pushed their skin, muscles, and entrails into them. From these memories, something jumps inside the creature, and it begins to feel an insatiable hunger again. With a terrible grin on its face, the monster lunges at Dallin, who has already turned his back on it. The mercenary seems to sense the approach of the enemy and grabs the hilt of his sword. A powerful roundhouse kick follows, and the monster's head flies far to the side. A notification appears when the target is destroyed. Then about the discovery of the hunter's corpse, which was eaten by the test subject. The third window offers to either pick up the corpse or pass it by. Dallin is standing in front of a decapitated enemy. The situation is, frankly, shit. This is the place with the raven over the door again. Going inside, Dallin meets Sienna. She is surprised to find out why the mercenary is not at the hotel where he seems to be going. Then she offers him a drink. Dallin shrugs the full pack off his shoulder and slams it down on the table. He says he's caught the culprit. Sienna is at a loss. It becomes clear to her that all the talk about the goblin massacre is true, and the galleon merchant wasn't talking nonsense. After praising Dallin for his work, she hands him a purse containing 15 shillings. The mercenary, according to her, coped with the task faster than expected, but she can't pay extra for the urgency. Dallin says this amount is enough for one walk. Sienna finally notices the bag and asks what's in it. The answer is that it contains the victim's belongings. The girl is surprised. She hadn't expected Dallin to give her any valuable possessions. He asks to transfer things to the families or friends of the victims and promises to pay for this service with the money just received. Sienna replies that she is not one of those merchants who try to extract money at all costs, and demands that Dallin take the bag. He smiles, thanks the girl, and promises to come back tomorrow. She reminds you that it is better to do this during her working hours. Dallin promises to do just that, but only if Sienna treats him to wine instead of tea. These words make the girl think. Dallin isn't acting like a mercenary at all. However, it is unlikely that a simple sense of justice has begun to speak in him. Sienna looks down at the satchel on the table. What an interesting mercenary. He definitely has good skills, and it makes sense to try to work with him. Dallin is in his hotel room, sitting at his desk, writing in his diary. But he had dealt with the monster before it turned into a real disaster. He even took the corpses of people who were killed. The status window appears. From changes. Sensitivity from 13 to 15. Health from 11 to 12. A new skill, night vision. Dallin understands that it is necessary to collect as many corpses as possible to prevent the end of the world, which is about to happen according to the script. There is a choice. Item 1. A group of witches who set the village on fire. Item 2. A secret sect hiding in the city. Item 3. A vampire who will attack the empire. Item 4. The evil spirit. Dallin remembers what the monster he killed said about golden masks with a huge mouth painted on them. He closes his diary. It is necessary to start with what is in his power. He leans over the table thoughtfully. This is a secret sect hiding in Falchion. If left alone, its members will then turn into creatures that can no longer be ignored. Before that happens, we need to slowly trim their wings. The crow's nest in. A young man with a well-groomed beard is polishing glasses at the bar. Dallin takes a chair and asks for a glass of Merlot Highlander. The bartender presses the table bell button with a straight face. Dallin takes a sip of his drink when he gets his order. Suddenly, Sienna appears in front of him. She reproaches him for coming in after hours again. The mercenary reasonably notes that if the establishment has a bartender and a customer, then the institution operates normally. The girl is dissatisfied with the fact that the client knows how to talk his teeth. He casually asks if he needs to catch someone today, to which he receives a negative answer. Sienna invites him to talk to her in her office. Dallin is quite surprised by this turn of events. In the office, the girl informs him that she has a personal order for the small street hunter. Dallin doesn't know who she's talking about. Sienna explains that this is now his nickname. After all, he roams this street and catches criminals. Other mercenaries try to avoid such tasks, and he has devoted the last week to them. Therefore, it is not at all surprising that the locals began to call it this way. Dallin says there are many other criminal hunters out there, but Sienna notes that he stands out among them because of his build. The two heroes start discussing the personal order. It's in Dallin's name, straight from the magic tower. There, in the Tower of Elgia, they really found out about him. To be more precise, the task was sent by only one elder mage. Dallin can't believe what he's hearing, since he only started working for Sienna a week ago. She assumes that the recommendation was made by one of her clients. After all, for rumors to reach the magic tower, there must be high-level connections that Dallin doesn't have yet. There is only one candidate for the role of Vestnik. This is the silent commander of the Chungdong Guards. A big figure, by the way. He may have connections at the very top. It would be nice to have him as an ally. Holding a glass in his hand, Dallin asks exactly what task he has to complete. So, the mission details. Title: The Elder Mage's Missing Disciple. The tower's only mage apprentice Elgia went missing in the sewers. For the discovery of his tracks 1 florin. For the return in a live form twice as much. Magicians treat their students like their own children. If you can save one of them, the wizards will be in Dallin's debt. This will surely come in handy at the right time. By the way, Sienna promised to give the mercenary a capable assistant. Suddenly, someone calls out to Dallin. A small man in a blue-topped cap asks if he's Dallin, the little street hunter. The little girl introduces herself as Fenny, a sewer cleaner, and then informs that she will help in this task. Dallin doesn't know what to say. After all, this is a child, with the most innocent expression on his face. Anyway, the couple descends into the tunnels, and Fenny begins to tell them that the sewers are the foundation of this huge city. She cleans it, so it turns out that she is responsible for the foundation of the city. It seems that she is delighted with her chosen profession. Dallin notices that you can meet both criminals and those who serve demons here. Had Fenny ever thought that it was very dangerous? Of course, she understands this. But she believes that there is always a reward for all difficulties. Yes, a very positive character. And she has been doing this work for 3 years. Usually, no one survives for more than a year. But she can be considered a veteran. Dallin and Fenny continue through the tunnels. They reach the point indicated on the map. This means that the mage's apprentice is missing somewhere here. The heroes enter a spacious underground hall. There are some strange stone paths and circles on the ground. There are remnants of columns and strange-looking lamps everywhere. Dallin considers the situation. The missing person was a disciple of the Elgea Tower mage. He must have been an earth mage, and for them, the sewer system underground is very important. If it's an elder's disciple, it should have some pretty good skills. Kidnap a magician. Most likely, a very unpleasant supporter of the sect. If it is fully formed, it will become as strong as an entire army. It won't be long before it's fully formed. For the sake of the future, we must deal with it now. Suddenly, Dallin notices something glistening in the sewer water. Reaching out, he pulls out an item that, on closer inspection, turns out to be a necklace with a one-time protection spell, the kind that, as far as the mercenary knows, is given out to apprentices in the tower. But there is no fire in the crystal, which means that the spell has already been cast. It turns out that this place was the mage's final destination. The heroes continue to explore the underground hall. Suddenly, Dallin hears a suspicious sound. He calls out to Fenny. It responds. The mercenary asks if his companion fights well. She says she can take care of herself. That's great, Dallin says, and pulls out his sword from behind his back. The mercenary is preparing to take the fight. He asks Fenny to hide behind him for now. Figures appear in the light of the mercenary's torch. They are strange creatures with human bodies and frog heads. In other words, the Frogmans. Monsters are low-ranked, but quite smart, so it's not so easy to deal with them. Fenny looks at these freaks with horror. Dallin doesn't think there's anything to worry about. The battle begins. The Frogmans charge at the mercenary. His eyes glow with a strange light. The sword always finds a living target. Blow follows blow. The rather fragile bodies of Frogmans are easily cut in half. Fenny shouts a warning to Dallin about the danger coming from the rear. Dallin turns around. The Frogmans are there too. In the hands of the leader is an unusual weapon, similar to a sharpened construction trowel. Behind him are rows of frogs with glass-like eyes. Dallin has a scary grin on his face. He doesn't think it's an army, but it could be a large force. However, it doesn't matter. He'll sweep them all away. The sewer water was the color of blood. Fenny, clutching a bloody knife to her chest, looks around the battlefield, clearly shaken. Dozens of Frogmen's corpses are strewn around it, many of them cut in half. Dallin asks if she's okay and gets an affirmative answer. She's been working in the sewers for 3 years, and a couple of Frogmans, according to her, is not a problem for her. Suddenly Dallin stops her, blocking her path with his shield. A spear comes flying from somewhere else. Dallin deflects the blow with his sword, but the weapon flies out of his hands. Then he grabs the axe. With a swing, he throws it into the dark opening where the spear just came from. Judging by the sound, the axe hits the target. Fenny asks in shock how the mercenary new Frogman was alive somewhere out there before the spear arrived. Dallin replies that monsters get smarter by hunting humans. We see a notification about activating the night vision skill. It becomes clear how it works. Dallin noticed in the dark how one of the Frogmans managed to escape. Something has to be done about the runaway. The mercenary thinks that we should go after him. The frog's nest should be somewhere nearby. Fenny admires her companion because he just finished fighting. The heroes once again go on the road. After a while, they find themselves in another huge hall. In front of them, at a distance, a throne with spikes, on which someone is sitting. Dallin is convinced that this is the one they're looking for. It's the first time he's seen this person in person. This is a mage who was chased out of the tower, Derek Valentino. The renegade, meanwhile, is outraged. He is not satisfied that the heroes have ruined his samples for experiments. This, by the way, is one of the bosses who previously killed the hero, and whose death at the hands of which he cannot forget until now. Dallin defiantly replies to Derek that he and Fenny have the right to kill monsters that interfere with their walk. To which the exile replies that ordinary people are not in the habit of walking through the sewers and do not come to the Frogmen's nests, chasing someone. The water begins to bubble. Frogmen's heads appear above its surface. The creatures scramble out onto a hard surface. Fenny is horrified by what is happening. There's an army of frogmen in front of her. If these creatures take to the streets of the city, trouble will not be avoided. Dallin cheers her on. He's covered in the blood of his enemies. Fenny realizes that his companion can handle the Frogmans, no matter how many of them there are. Derek, who has a glowing crystal in his hand, orders his servants to tear the bastards apart with a hideous grin on his face. The Frogmans immediately attack. There are a lot of them. Dallin asks Fenny to wait where they are now. He promises to quickly deal with the opponents and return. The mercenary knows that if the caster dies, the Frogmans will flee. Apparently, there is no alternative plan. The mercenary enters the battle. His sword kills again. Dallin tries to fight his way to the caster through the hordes of enemies. Frogs' heads are flying in different directions. Vile creatures die, making disgusting screams. Dallin's sword cuts through the ranks of Frogmans. It's a monstrously spectacular sight. Dallin doesn't forget to use her fists either. Such strikes are also fatal for Frogmans. The mercenary goes wild. This is a real killing machine. There's no stopping him now. At some point, Dallin's sword breaks in half. The shield also breaks down and splits. The hero is disarmed, and the enemies do not seem to be getting smaller. But he's not going to give up. A notification appears when the Dehaman armor battle technique is activated. Dallin fights with his fists, and their blows literally explode the frogmen's heads. Yeah. Another punch. Now the mercenary punches his hands through the torsos of enemies. Derek sees that the battle is beginning to take a turn against him. He becomes afraid. Where did such a monster come from, he wonders. An axe appears in Dallin's hands. The exiled mage realizes that this is a death sentence for him. He calls for Enixa. Dallin strikes, and a shaft of light shoots up from Derek's body. The axe is stuck right in the Frogman Lord's forehead. Dallin stares tiredly at his fallen opponent. A notification appears about the discovery of the corpse of a mercenary who was made a test subject of the sect. Dallin realizes that the mage who killed him earlier has absorbed the dragon's blood that was formed in his body. It was a truly horrifying sight, and an incredibly painful death. Another notification is about the possibility of collecting a corpse. Dallin chooses the answer yes. Sensitivity, health, and magic power are increased by 1 unit. The hero's hands shine with a white light. Another notification, the skill Dragon Blood Rebirth has been detected. It is one of the many properties of dragon blood that can be applied to humans. This is the lowest level of all dragon blood stats, but it is the most coveted ability for mortals. Mastery of 6%. Dallin's face contorts into a terrible grimace. He grits his teeth at the unbearable pain. The mercenary's body spews out powerful energy bolts. The surviving frogmans watch this spectacular doomsday with horror. Fenny also looks shocked. Dallin is enveloped in an aura of light. He turns to face the frogman. A smile appears on his face. The hero mockingly asks if he really saw everything the frogmans are capable of. Dallin turns to the frogmans, asking them if they've done their best. The frogs' faces contort with fear. Leaving their dead on the floor of the underground hall, the creatures run away in horror in different directions. Dallin sighs wearily. Fenny calls his name. The mercenary reproaches her for leaving the place where he asked her to stay. After asking if Dallin is all right, the girl, who looks scared, asks if her companion is really a human. Dallin doesn't understand what could have made her doubt that. Fenny is almost convinced that Dallin is human. But not all people from the north are like him. In addition, he kills dozens of frogmans with his bare hands, and all his wounds are immediately healed. Dallin asks her companion, "What do you think?" She doesn't understand why the question was asked to her. Dallin insists, since there don't seem to be any other interlocutors here. Trying to sort out her feelings, Fenny begins to respond. She only met Dallin today, but she can already see how different he is from everyone else she knows. It feels like he can overcome anything in the world. But it doesn't matter if he's human or not. The main thing is that he is him. Dallin smiles and puts a hand to his head. It turns out that he wasn't asking about himself at all. He wanted Fenny's opinion on where the fallen mage might have hidden the hostages. The girl laughs out loud. How was she supposed to know that when Dallin has expressed his thoughts in the strangest way possible? We are inside a majestic cathedral with an inverted cross above the door. Inside are 4 men in hooded monk robes. One of them informs his comrades that they have gathered in an emergency because of Derek's death. The news shocks them. They want to know how their colleague died. Although he was the last to join the sect, he wasn't weak enough to die easily. They also wonder what happened to the Frogman army, which had more than 500 warriors. An informed cultist reports that half of the frogs have died. The other one ran away as soon as Derek died. Is this the work of the guards? They ask. Or scum, in other words, the Silent One squad? In response, they learn that neither one thing nor the other was done by one person. They are trying to find out whether the elder mage was involved, whose idiot Derek kidnapped the student. The narrator reports that Felver Valentino did nothing. Some sounds reach the participants of the conversation. Alert. Everyone falls silent. The great apostle appears, and the congregation greets him. He sits down on his majestic throne. He says that he did not gather his followers in order to intimidate them with a lousy mercenary. This thesis frightens one of them. What kind of monster is this that has dealt with an entire army of monsters? The apostle cuts him off abruptly. He says that the date of the grand plan will have to be changed. The death of Derek should not affect the plan of the audience. Once again, there are some doubts among the subordinates. The apostle orders to open the vault, buy all the necessary ingredients, and bring those who can hold weapons in their hands. If there are problems, you need to use the power of the merchants. This is exactly the case for them to cultivate their power. Nothing has changed. The confrontation will start with the sect, and the day of the destruction of the 7 walls will approach. They will do anything for this day. Qingdong, Elgaya Tower. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Inside the cathedral, Dallin is comfortably ensconced in a chair. He hasn't been here in 2 years, but he's just as comfortable as he was then. Sienna informs the mercenary that the client wants to meet with him in person and hand over the proper reward. Dallin believes that this is a very good thing, since there is an opportunity to get an additional reward. It opens the status window. A new skill is marked in blue in the pop-up window. This is Dragon Blood Rebirth. This is one of the skills that is applied to people. However, too many health points are spent when used. When Dallin returned from the sewers, he slept for a full day, which really speaks to the imperfection of this skill. It can't be used continuously during a battle. Here is an elderly man with a full red beard. He expresses regret that he kept his guest waiting because of the extreme busyness. This is Felver Valentino, the Elgaya Tower's elder mage. He is about to make tea and offers a cup of drink to his guest, who agrees. Felver, grinning, says that he understands now why few people agree to go on business trips. Suddenly, Dallin smells something. When he sniffs it, he realizes it's coffee. Felver sees how happy Dallin is drinking this drink and offers to take 1 bag of coffee beans to the crow's nest. The mercenary thanks the other person for this generous gift. The bearded man introduces himself. His name is Felver Valentino. He is an elder of the Elgaya Tower and an earth mage cultivating a small territory. He is also Tommy's teacher, who was saved by Dallin. Dallin also introduces himself and asks if the young blonde wizard found in the sewer is all right. Felver replies that he is fine, but he will be punished for a while. Dallin expresses confusion about the punishment. The bearded man explains its reasons. Tommy went down the drain, as he accidentally found out about Felver's teacher and went to look for him. He didn't even know that the tracks he was following were Derik's ploy to trap Felver. The elder mage thanks Dallin, especially noting that he managed not only to deal with the Frogman army, but also with their master. I can't even believe that a silver-ranked mercenary could have done it. However, he notes that a person cannot be judged only by status, because everyone has their own story. Felver hands the mercenary a reward, a purse containing 1 gold coin and 100 silver coins. As for the extra reward, Felver wonders. This is a rebirth potion that can be useful to Dallin in battles. However, the bearded man points out, a person with dragon blood doesn't really need it. Dallin is confused, clearly disturbed by what he's heard. Noticing the mercenary's agitation, Felver reassures him he's not going to harm Dallin, just wants to make an offer. The mercenary is shaking with nervous excitement, but he asks what it is all about. Felver suggests that he choose a different reward. Dallin stands on the steps of the Grand Cathedral. He recalls Felver praising him for making a good choice, which would be a great chance. Also, the mercenary is surprised by the power of the magician. He was able to recognize dragon blood in him, which almost led to bloodshed. It was a good thing Dallin hadn't had time to buy a new axe. The old one broke down in the sewers during the battle with the Frogmans. Fenny was still very confused about how to handle this weapon. Then she remembered that her uncle was a blacksmith, and he could make a discount for Dallin at her request. Now is just the time to take advantage of this offer. Blacksmith Street, Qingdong. We are on the street in front of a workshop, with a sign with an anvil hanging over the entrance. It looked like Dallin had come to the right place. The mercenary hears sounds of some kind of quarrel. A man in blue pants crashes into the street in front of him. There are also his abusers, an evil blonde man in high boots, and a bully who holds the hands of a desperately screaming Fenny. The defeated man demands that the villains take their hands off the girl. Dallin can't believe what he's seeing. Dallin stands in front of the blacksmith shop. Its owner is lying in front of the workshop, and the blonde extortionist is looming over him. The scoundrel says that if the blacksmith had paid the interest on time, nothing like this would have happened to him. Instead of money, he offers to give his niece if the owner likes her. The debt can be forgiven. Barreau, that's the blacksmith's name, looks at the extortionist with anger and contempt and orders him to shut his filthy mouth. Dallin hadn't expected to find a blacksmith here. He knows him as Roberton Ahakam, the master of Mithril. Until the second half of the game, Thoth constantly developed his abilities and produced the best weapons and armor in the world for humanity. It was one of the main NPCs needed for battles. Meanwhile, the blonde extortionist says that he can chop off the blacksmith's hands according to the agreement. Each of the limbs was worth 1 gold piece. Suddenly, the man's hand, which is holding an oddly shaped cleaver, is intercepted by someone. The extortionist is very scared. He asks to be released. In response, he hears that if the blacksmith's hand is worth 1 gold, then he can tell the price for his own upper limb. A fight begins, but it ends quickly. A beer mug lands on the wooden table with a loud thud. The blacksmith thanks Dallin for saving both him and his niece, who had already told him about the mercenary. Barreau knows that Dallin needs a new weapon, but at the moment, the blacksmith cannot create something normal, as he has a large debt to the trading company. The mercenary asks what connection there can be between duty and making weapons. It turns out that the creditors took the tools instead of interest, and now Barreau has nothing to work with. In addition, the trading company suggested that the master close the forge and work directly for it. The debt, in this case, would be covered after 5 years of work. But the closure of the workshop means the end of Barreau as a professional in 5 years. He will have to work in someone else's blacksmith shop, from where he can be kicked out at any time. Dallin agrees. He knows that there are age restrictions for new employees. Barreau curses the people of Talia. He is sure that their goal was originally to enslave him. How much? Asks Dallin. The blacksmith asks in disbelief. With a smile, the mercenary confirms that he is going to close Barreau's debt. But the blacksmith doubts that this is possible. The debt is 26 florins and Dallin alone is unlikely to collect this amount. However, our hero calms Barreau down. He has a reliable way. In exchange, he takes a weapon and axe. Advance payment. After thanking the blacksmith for the beer, the mercenary leaves. Barreau asks his niece who this Dallin guy is. Fenny is still not sure if this is a person, but she knows for sure that this is an outstanding person. Gallia Trading Company, Qingdong. A middle-aged man carrying a wooden bar on his shoulder asks Dallin to repeat what he just said. The mercenary says that he asked me to lend him money about a bag of gold. The man looks at the other person in disbelief. An ordinary city house, evening. Dallin is holding a purple-colored pouch. He had just received an order. First, he talked to a bearded man and told the story of an acquaintance who got into debt. Enjoying the juicy grapes, Dallin told how the amount he was looking for gradually grew and increased several dozen times. Money is really very necessary. Lighting a cigar, the bearded man asks who exactly Dallin's friend owes money to, because this can't be his company. The mercenary reports that this is the company, Talia. The bearded man's expression changes. It becomes stern. He agrees to lend Dallin the money, and the mercenary asks if the man has any personal accounts with Talia. He begins to laugh and praises the interlocutor for his remarkable intelligence. He reports that the Talia has a rather dirty tale. The bearded man suggests we meet at the same time tomorrow. He'll give Dallin the details of the order. The company, Talia, is a group of sectarians who were raised by the apostles of resistance. They've taken over most of Qingdong's commercial districts. The sect actually dominates the city. Dallin was just planning to take down the head of this company. And now everything is moving towards this outcome in its own way. It would be nice to break into their residence right now and deal with the scoundrels. But officially, this is a legitimate organization, so you need to prepare well for the battle. First, you can get Robin out of the clutches of Talia. Dallin comes to a 4-story building from which very loud sounds are coming. This is Roberin's smithy, and the mercenary understands that the people of Talia, apparently, have begun to act. He runs as fast as he can to the source of the sounds. An armed mob has gathered in front of the smithy, and the blacksmith and his niece are standing in the doorway. A young man demands that Barreau just go with them. The people, he says, didn't come here for a few pennies. The blacksmith, behind whom Fetty is hiding in fear, refuses and shouts that the scoundrels should go to hell. He's holding a heavy sledgehammer. The guy pretends that he is very afraid of the hammer, which can fly directly to his head. But he asks, what about dozens of other thugs? But it's clear from Barreau's menacing look that he's not going to give up. The guy gives the order to capture both the old man and the girl. Spinning wildly, the axe cuts through the air. Its blade cuts off the arm of the scoundrel who gave the command. He screams, scaring the rest of the gang to death. Dallin wrings the neck of one of the goons. It was very impressive. A statement follows for the rest of the raiders. The mercenary decided that the life of each of them is worth 1 silver coin and is determined to earn good money. Dallin launches a furious attack on enemies. The Dehaman armor combat technique skill is activated. The mercenary's fists smash the villains' heads. Bulging eyes. Blood gushing from his mouth. Ridiculous poses and terrible screams. The ransomware attacks Dallin in waves, but he manages to cope with all of them. Enemies are encouraged by the fact that he has no weapons, but fists are enough for him. The blacksmith and his niece look on in awe at the carnage unfolding in front of them. The street is thickly littered with bloodied bodies lying in intricate poses. Crippled villains try to complain, but they quickly fall silent under Dallin's merciless boots. The battle ends. The blacksmith, who cannot believe what is happening, asks the mercenary who he really is. The latter casually tosses him a purse containing 26 gold pieces. Barreau is shocked and asks why Dallin is even helping him. With a wink, he says that it is very useful to be friends with blacksmiths. Barreau, for example, can make weapons for him. Dallin looms over the guy on the ground, who seems to have spoken for the crowd earlier. He picks up the scoundrel by the scruff of the neck so that he will stop pretending to be dead. The mercenary demands to name the customer of this raid. The guy, grinning madly, refuses to do it, and immediately gets a powerful blow to the jaw. Dallin gives him one last chance and asks him what specific order he received from the trading company. Grab them all, that's the answer. Who exactly the mercenary is interested in? Shopkeepers, merchants, and anyone else connected with the trade. And if it doesn't work out, kill them. Dallin's eyes fill with rage, and he asks who gave the order. He punches the scumbag in the jaw again for emphasis. He gives out the customer. This is the head of Telly. Suddenly, the bandit's appearance begins to change. He giggles and grins in the most terrible way. Dallin stares at the enemy in amazement and strikes again. But the one with the face changed beyond recognition just keeps laughing. The mercenary picks up his axe from the ground, and one blow finishes off the merry man. Dumbfounded, the blacksmith asks what it was all about, and Dallin assumes it's a monster. Apparently, the servants of the company have learned to turn into monsters at will. This particular one was moving frighteningly fast. After advising the blacksmith to keep the doors closed for the next few days, Dallin begins to leave. Barreau calls out to ask him where he's gone. The moment of meeting the bearded man pops up in the hero's memory. He tells the blacksmith that he is going to the Gallia company, and that the scoundrels, as it seems to him, are hunting for one of his wealthy clients. Dallin says he'll come get the weapons and armor when he's done with the chores. Residents of the bearded man from Gallia, standing in front of the window next to the bed. The man thinks that Dallin probably didn't accidentally mention the company Talia. It was previously suspicious, and recently its representatives began to buy goods in large quantities, as if something serious is being prepared. It's not just trading. The bearded man remembers Dallin's face as he eats an apple, wondering what to do. Well, the matter can wait until he arrives. The head of Gallia decides for himself. He drinks coffee, which, in his opinion, can't be better than anything else in the whole world. Suddenly, the window behind the bearded man shatters, and Dallin flies in. The mercenary lands on one knee and looks around. The head of Gallia turns around in surprise and sees Dallin, who immediately orders him to duck. At the same time, arrows fly through the window. What's going on at all? The bearded man asks blankly. The mercenary tells him that if he had been even a moment late, something irreparable would have happened. Cutting off further questions, Dallin advises the man to hide under the bed. He pulls out his trusty axe and hurls it violently through the window. It flies at a blurry figure lurking on a nearby roof, and it hits her right in the forehead. Dallin asks the bearded man to stay under the bed until he returns, and he agrees. The mercenary has a predatory smile on his face. He says that he will hunt for points. What's the matter with him? The bearded man thinks, crawling under the bed. Dallin rushes outside, through the same window he flew through a few minutes earlier, and then he was on the next roof. The mercenary sees that his axe is sticking out not only in his forehead, but also in the white mask that covered the face of the murdered scoundrel. Dallin looks around. His eyes find many people in monastic robes. Their faces are also covered with white masks. Apparently, the main forces, namely the white and gold masks, began to act. You can expect anything. Dallin removes the axe from the dead man's forehead. He realizes that there is not much time left before the villain's plan is implemented. A dart flies at Dallin. The mercenary fights it off with an axe. It accelerates and rushes in the direction of the previously discovered figures. He starts throwing punches. As usual, very accurate. Dallin's axe draws spectacular circles in the air. Blood sprays everywhere. His victims are 3 enemies. The battle continues. Suddenly, Darren realizes that this is the mercenary who killed Derek. This figure is different from others. First of all, long and wide arms fluttering in the wind. A sinister stranger with long spikes sticking out of his fists says he wanted to taste Dallin's blood as soon as he heard about his exploits. After all, the blood of brave warriors always tastes good. Dallin realizes it's a silver mask. Our hero did not think that any of the leaders would appear here. Stray Luderhafen is a low-level vampire, a poison and dark time assassin. In the game, it was difficult to respond to his attack. Can the hero cope now? Dallin has only to fight the enemy. He, by the way, is confident in his easy and quick victory. Through the mask, you can see his evil grin. Dallin is determined. He rushes at his enemy. The hero tries to hit the silver mask, but always misses. Dallin blames his own haste for the mistakes, because he really wanted to attack the villain. It's all because of his character's corpse that was devoured by the cultist earlier. Before us is a notification about the discovery of the killer's corpse, dissecting the night sky. And one more thing. Dallin wasn't the only one being attacked by this enemy. On his side are the people in white and gold masks who were not able to be destroyed due to the appearance of the silver mask. We need to deal with them first. Enemies rush to attack Dallin, and their leader promises to squeeze all the blood out of him. They're firing crossbows. Arrows fly straight at Dallin. To the astonishment of the shooters, he avoids the projectiles by jumping several meters up. It lands next to the arrows and promptly destroys them with his axe. The snipers are finished. It remains to finish off the usual infantrymen. Dallin uses both his axe and his fists. The combat technique skill in Dehaman's armor is activated. This means that the damage from fist strikes increases many times. Enemies are shocked by the power of Dallin. He seems to them some kind of monster. Finally, our hero has only one opponent left. Dallin raises the axe over his head to finish him off. Hit. But the enemy miraculously dodges and bounces far away. Dallin sees a green cloud in front of him. He realizes that a poison pouch has just been used on him. He inhales the poisoned air. Silver Mask glares at him from the sidelines. He knows that an ordinary person can't stand up to such a poison. I didn't want to use it because I didn't want to hurt my own people. But since all but one of them is dead, there's nothing to worry about. Dallin had slaughtered all of his men on his own, and the villain was glad he hadn't come face to face with him. But now the outcome of their fight Seems a foregone conclusion. Dallin must lose. Vampires might be able to resist poison, but he's a lowly human, so he can't survive. The silver mask approaches Dallin, who is lying on the roof. The corpse, however, looks a bit strange. After a closer look, the villain realizes that this is a golden mask. Dallin flies up from behind the bewildered cultist. The silver mask shrinks in horror. Dallin swings his axe, but the other man jumps back again. The latter simply doesn't understand how Dallin was able to survive the gas attack. Apparently, he's not human, and some kind of monster. Meanwhile, Dallin's eyes sting. He remembers aloud what it was like training in a chemical room in the army. A completely disgusting life experience. Silver Mask doesn't understand what nonsense his opponent is talking about. But it doesn't matter, the battle continues. The scoundrel asks only one thing from Dallin, that he die beautifully. But his opponent seems calm. He asks with a grin why the Silver Mask always uses the same techniques. A notification appears when the Dragon Blood Respawn skill is activated. Dallin charges at the enemy and grabs him by the throat with his hand. Looking sternly at the cultist, the mercenary suggests that he say something last. He finds nothing more appropriate and asks how Dallin managed to resist the poison. No human being is capable of such a thing. Is it possible for him to finish the sentence? Death comes faster. We see a notification about the destruction of the enemy. Dallin is glad that his enemy was a low-ranking vampire. A higher-class bloodsucker would have escaped by turning into a bat or shadow. Another alert, this time about the discovery of the killer's corpse cutting through the night sky. It looks like he wanted to kill a vampire, but he died from a bite and blood loss. A notification appears about the possibility to pick up a corpse. Dallin selects the yes option. Another window. You have taken a corpse. Its skills are transferred to you. The reward is muscle strength +3. The skill jumps. We are transported to the residence of the head of the Gallia company with a broken window and arrows sticking out in the floor. A frightened bearded man holds a sword in his hands. He thinks that they wanted to kill him in broad daylight. He looks out the window thinking that he should try to calm down somehow. I can't believe what's happening. The bearded man decides to call the guards, just in case. He reaches for the door handle, thinking that it would be nice if Dallin was still alive. Suddenly, a figure appears behind him, his eyes shining brightly in his face. The bearded man turns around. Then he sinks to the floor, inhaling something disgusting. Dallin. And he's the one who came into the room. Thinks it might be a good idea to learn how to control his strength better. He's just recently gained 3 points of muscle strength. He tries to tell the bearded man that he has dealt with all the enemies, but the potential interlocutor is very bad. He hardly hears anything. He's foaming at the mouth, and Dallin guesses that the bearded man must have been poisoned. The owner of the Gallia probably didn't sit under the bed and got out early. A girl enters the room. According to her, she came to the noise. It's Sienna, asking if she really sees Dallin. Then she asks what he's doing here. Finally, the girl says that she got the information that he was looking for. Dallin, the head of Gallia, and Sienna are sitting at the table. So you're the one who supplies the information to the crow's nest? The bearded man asks the girl. It confirms his guess. You sent an agent to my trading company and then snuck in here yourself, he asks her. Sienna replies that otherwise she wouldn't have been able to figure out Dallin's location. Then she turns to Dallin about her promise to find out some information. She managed to find out which organization owned the silver mask that he gave her. Dallin remembers giving her mask away after the sewer massacre, which means that Sienna didn't have much time to investigate. She's much more capable than he thought. It remains to be seen whether the results of her research are correct. So who is it? Dallin asks Sienna. She replies that they are heretics serving an evil god. They call themselves the Apostles of Retrograde. Sienna places a large ledger on the table. The bearded man already jumps up in his chair. He knows that this book is one of the institutions of Telly. Sienna says she found something interesting in the ledger. The owner of this establishment is one of the leaders of the Apostles of Retrograde. And in recent days, he has been buying an incredible amount of medicines, weapons, and metal. Sienna shows on the map where the attackers took the purchased goods. This is a warehouse that was purchased long ago by Telia and was abandoned some time ago. Dallin knows this place. Sienna continues the story. In this area of the city, people often meet heretics whose faces are covered with masks. They also saw hired criminals and merchants and artisans abducted by sectarians. Dallin begins to realize that the apostles want to turn thieves and vagabonds into half-monsters, and merchants and artisans will produce weapons. Apparently, the war will start very soon. He asks Sienna if there is any news from the Bronze Guards and how well she knows the commander of the Silent Squad. The girl replies that she spoke with the latter. He agreed to cooperate, but he will not attack a large enterprise without clear evidence of crimes taking place there, especially since it is located outside the area of his patrol. Dallin doesn't think that's a problem. You just need to give the guards a reason to justify their intervention. Before us are the mighty walls of a tall building. In front of him, someone is freezing, complaining that the winter is too cold this year. These are two sectarians in masks and monastic robes. They complain that instead of them, there could be thieves and vagabonds involved in cooperation. One of the interviewees thinks that it doesn't make sense to protect this building. His partner urges his colleague to shut up, as the apostle in the golden mask may well strangle them for such conversations. The first does not let up. The apostles, according to him, run around like crazy in the morning on other things. He is sure that the implementation of the great plan will soon begin, and it will be a revolution that pleases God. But the other person no longer hears him. He is lying face down on the ground. The cultist turns around and his eyes fill with horror. Dallin is standing in front of him. White and red masks. He killed them all. The cultist doesn't believe his ears. A punch follows, and he joins his partner. Dallin assesses the situation. By now, he'd dealt with 30 of the bastards. Their bodies litter the street and nearby rooftops. No one can stop the decisive phase of his attack. It bounces high. It lands in front of a building. By now, there are no more beggars or drug addicts in the alleys around them. Dallin is sure they've all been turned into half-monsters by now. The sectarians have accelerated the implementation of their great plan, and now they probably no longer care about the secrecy of their actions. This morning, the Bronze Guards had promised Dallin and Sienna that they would help in the coming battle. The plan is simple. Overcome security and enter the warehouse through the first floor. Then you need to deal with all the enemies that may meet there and set fire to the building. There will be a commotion, and the guards who accidentally find themselves in the area and put out the fire will try to find evidence against the heretics. It's supposed to be perfect, but Dallin's worried about one thing. The warehouse building has 5 floors, and somewhere inside there must be the owner of the previously mentioned tele division. Would he slip away when the attackers broke into the first floor? Wouldn't this allow him to better prepare for the decisive battle? Not very clear. But you need to take into account any possible developments, regardless of who your opponent is, heretics or servants of the devil. This is the only way to ensure that the infection is trampled underfoot. The worst thing will be if the owner of Telly's runs away, Dallin thinks, so he decides to choose a different method. Step by step. It accelerates, and it bounces. The jump skill is activated. The mercenary flies up to the roof of a 5-story building. Then there is another jump. Acceleration. Landing. Finally, Dallin gets where he wanted to go. He is in a gloomy room with brick walls, lit by rare open burning lamps. This is a prison that holds an army of half-monsters. Very unpleasant memories come back to Dallin's mind. Dallin walks up to the man standing at the altar and says, "I'm not sure what you're talking about." He says that he saw the presence of God within his great apostles. But this is the first time that he seems to be seeing things. "Did you use a spell?" he asks Dallin, holding the mask in front of his face. This is Achilles Philnum, the owner of the Telia company. Dallin says he doesn't know much about spells, but if Achilles has problems with his eyes, then it would be reasonable to contact an optometrist. Or at the very least, to the eye socket. The battle begins. Dallin with an axe versus Achilles with a sword. Opponents exchange powerful blows. Achilles feels the monstrous power of his opponent. He would quite believe it if the blood of an orc or even a giant flowed in his veins. It can't be a coincidence that Dallin defeated the other apostles. The mercenary really shakes the power of his attacks. It is not by chance that the great apostle decided to speed up the implementation of his plan. Achilles thinks, looking at the enemy. To defeat it, you need to do something special. Achilles casts unintelligible spells. Dallin is perplexed. Something is beginning to change around them. Achilles, holding his sword straight in front of him, is enveloped in a red haze. First, he decided to awaken the half-monsters. These monsters are actually waking up. They're grinning, and there's an eerie light in their eyes. But it takes time for them to reach their full strength. Dallin is aware of this. Before they hit him with all their might, the caster's stamina should be reduced, he thinks. Then it hits him with a vengeance. His axe circles in the air, repeatedly descending on the enemy. They come from the side, from above, and sometimes from below. Achilles deflects them with his sword, but he is always struck by the force with which they are applied. His face is starting to look tired. Dallin strikes again, and the Achilles mask shatters. Fists are used. The opponents look into each other's eyes. Feeling Achilles' fatigue, Dallin attacks him again with the axe. How did he get it? The cultist thinks, beating off another blow with his sword. Fists. An axe. A sword. Sparks flying in all directions. Achilles was completely exhausted. Just a little more, and he would collapse to the floor. And he won't get up again. Clearing his throat, Achilles sinks to the floor, his sword ready to fall from his hand. It seems that he still lasted as long as it took for the half-monsters to fully awaken. "Inahataran," he says. Achilles' face is transformed. He waited for his servants. Those in dense rows are approaching the place of the fight. They growl loudly and drool, their tongues hanging far out of their toothy mouths. When they see Dallin, they rush at him. The mercenary stands with his back straight and proud, waiting for them to get close enough. A notification appears when a mage who uses a sword corpse is detected. Dallin smiles slyly. The corpses, and with them the experience, fall into his hands. The half-monsters crowd down on him, and in fact fill up their bodies. The carnage is entering a much bloodier phase. This bastard is a real monster. Achilles thinks he doesn't feel any fatigue from the half-monster's attacks. The scoundrel examines his armor, which has been completely destroyed by Dallin's fists alone. Achilles realizes that all this will not end well for him. There's only one way to kill a bastard like that, he thinks. Surprise attack, while he is distracted by half a meter. During his time in the Order of Chivalry, he had acquired a rather useful skill. This is the Two Swords of Scandon. If you take into account the insane fatigue, Achilles has only one attempt at successful use of it. Dallin continues to destroy half-monsters. Achilles picks up his sword, holds it out in front of him, and rushes swiftly at his enemy. After a moment, the point of the weapon will pierce the back of a tireless mercenary. The sword is already so close to Dallin that Achilles has no doubts about the success of his lunge. Suddenly, the blade snaps in half. Achilles' shock is beyond words. Meanwhile, Dallin's axe breaks. Why did his instant kill attack happen so suddenly, he says. Achilles tries to understand. But to get an answer to this question is not possible. The cultist falls to the floor, still holding the fragment of his sword in his hands. Dallin looks down at the remains of his axe. He knows he won't be able to use his trusty weapon again. Suddenly, he starts coughing. Blood. A reminder appears to activate the dragon blood regeneration skill. Dallin calls up the status window. It carefully examines the parameters specified there. There seems to be a strong extraneous effect on his body. Perhaps this is due to the fact that Dallin previously pumped only the power component, and it was necessary to approach the development in a more balanced way. Dallin turns around, almost forgetting to do something very important. A notification appears when the specified target is destroyed. Another window reports the discovery of a mage using a sword corpse. You can either pick it up or leave it. He allowed himself to be devoured in the most shameful way. I was then experimenting with the simultaneous use of sword and magic, recalls Dallin. A complete failure. Collecting corpses. Another blue window indicates that the mercenary took the corpse, taking over its abilities. Mana +2. Stamina +1. And here is something more serious. You have received the skill Fire Arrow. Finally, it is reported that spell comprehension fills the hero's head. Dallin looks down in surprise at his hand, which is emitting a soft glow. He senses something and assumes it's the power of mana. Ignal Lot, he says. A red sphere appears in his hand, scattering protuberances. A satisfied smile appears on Dallin's face. Well, what? Play with fire. The 5-story warehouse building is ablaze from bottom to top, and shouts of "attack" and "spare no one" are heard next to it. A real battle is unfolding here. People are being impaled on spikes. They are hacked with swords. The guards, Dallin's allies, fight to the death with cultists and half-monsters. Blood flows freely. Everyone tries to take as many enemy lives as possible. Masked Sextant knocks down a guard with a powerful blow. Then she approaches him with a dagger in her hand, preparing to cut his throat. The defeated man tries to find a weapon to protect his life. He frantically gropes the ground around him, but the scoundrel's boot crudely steps on it. The guard realizes that this is the end. His eyes widen in animal horror. Salvation comes through the air in the form of a spear. It pierces the cultist, and the guard looks at his savior in disbelief. He looms on the 5th floor of a burning building, where a huge piece of wall recently collapsed. Naturally, this is Dallin. He holds several spears in his hands, lifts them up, and with force throws 3 shells at the enemies at once. It is filled with the energy of fire, and that should decide the outcome of the battle. The spears fly one after another, hitting sectarians who can hardly oppose this shelling. The guards stare at the scene in disbelief. In disbelief, they pick up the bloody spears and examine them, realizing that this is a victory. They rush to finish off the remaining sectarians. Dallin looks down on what is happening. He sees that his intervention predetermined the outcome of the battle, but picking up an axe from the floor, rushes to the aid of the guards. He runs away. The jump skill is activated. The Dallins land on the street, 5 floors below the push-off point. The battle is over the street around the warehouse, is filled with dozens of bodies of dead and wounded participants in the battle. The crippled ones groan loudly and scream for help and a regeneration potion. Dallin looms over the fight, thinking about the very potion that would be so useful to the guards right now. He could have taken it from a senior mage. In that case, he would have saved a few people today. However, what he took instead of the regeneration potion is able to save many more lives. A guard approaches Dallin, glad to finally meet the mercenary. His name is Gawain. He leads a quiet squadron of bronze guards. He says that thanks to Dallin's wisdom and timely support, they managed to defeat their enemies as a representative of the Bronze Guard. He expresses his sincere gratitude. Dallin thinks to himself that Gawain did his best in the fight, and it would be nice to be friends with him. "I heard you told the Elgai elders about me," he says to Gawain. He confirms, and the 2 men shake hands. "You impressed me when you fairly distributed the reward Sienna gave you." "Yes, and today you showed yourself in the most impressive way. Keep it up, especially with the rewards you're getting," Gawain tells Dallin. The mercenary agrees, and the 2 new companions shake hands again. Suddenly, Dallin realizes that something is wrong with him. He has a splitting headache apparently. He overestimated himself, overextended his strength, and now he needs a good rest. Turning around, he walks home with a tired step. "Wear some armor," Gawain tells him. "No matter how strong you are, no one knows what might happen." I was just about to get something like that, Dallin thinks. Dallin walks along the city street, where children run around and older people roam peacefully. The owner of the trading company said it must be here somewhere, he thinks. Exactly. Here it is. The blacksmith shop that Gallia provided to the blacksmith to replace the old one. Dallin goes inside, asking loudly how everyone in the workshop is doing. "Ah, Sir Dallin, Fenny says happily. Uncle, he's here, she shouts to the entire blacksmith shop. Just in time, Barreau tells her. Here's your order. The blacksmith shows the mercenary a medium-sized crate. The master expresses the hope that the client will enjoy his work. Dallin opens the drawer, quite carefully. Great. This is exactly what you need. No one could have done it better. Barreau bursts out laughing and offers Dallin a choice of weapons from the rack. He takes out a terrifying axe. It is more useful than ever, since the previous weapon, the axe, could not withstand the load assigned to it. Dallin notices that someone is standing outside the door of the forge and realizes that this person has come for his soul. He apologizes to Barreau for not being able to pay the full price yet and says he has to go about his business. The blacksmith replies that the mercenary does not owe him anything. It is thanks to him that he now has a new forge. Dallin thanks him for the amazing weapon and encourages him to work just as efficiently in the future. Barreau is damned glad to hear that. You came faster than I expected. It seems that the situation is very serious. Dallin says to the person who came to pick him up at the blacksmith shop. He apologizes for distracting Dallin from a good conversation. But the situation is really worse than ever. He needs the help of a mercenary. This is Gawain, and he reports that the heretics have gathered all the forces they have left. The 8th territory of the Eastern District passed into their hands.